Hi, and welcome back to Lisa's Stamp Studio. If you're like me, you've had an occasion where you need a larger card for multiple signatures. Maybe it's an office card where you're all pitching in for a small gift, or just a way to say happy birthday. Maybe it's a shower gift or a wedding gift. And today I'm going to teach you a way to make an expanded greeting card that fits in a regular size envelope. Here's a quick look at the cover of the card we're going to be creating together today. I have lots of tips for you regarding a bundle of products that you're absolutely going to love for birthdays. But keep in mind, you can change this project to be any theme whatsoever. If this is your first time visiting my channel, you're going to be able to find a link down in the video description below, which will lead you over to the pictures, cutting dimensions, and the supplies that I've used for today's project. And while you're below, make sure you click that subscribe button and the bell icon so that you'll get notifications when I'm live right here on YouTube, as well as when I share a new video. Let's head over to the stamp table and let's get started on today's card. We're going to start with 2 pieces of Whisper White cardstock for the card base. They both measure 5.5 by 8.5, and I did score them both in half before you joined me. If you've watched my videos before, you know that I'm a big fan of the bone folder for a nice crisp edge. And because this card is going to have multiple layers to it, for the inside panels, I want to make sure that I have really good score lines that are well reinforced. Now you can see that both of these cards open with the fold on the left-hand side. Let's start by making this expanded card base first. And what I'm going to do is add adhesive around the outside perimeter of this card, and I'm going to adhere it here to the inside of this card. I'm using the Stampin' Seal Plus. I'm going to work around the outside perimeter of this card base. This adhesive is very, very strong, so I'm assured that it's not going to fall apart when the 2 panels are connected. Making sure that the fold is on the left-hand side, I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to line these 2 panels and connect them. Once I've pressed that in place, you'll see that I'm going to open up the right side, so that gives me a very interesting tri-fold card. So when we close it, we're just going to crisscross those panels. Now let's talk about decorating the card. I'm going to protect my work surface with one of the small grid sheets, and I've got a piece of Calypso Coral cardstock. This measures 3.5 by 4. I'm going to be using Versamark ink to create a very subtle background on this card base. And I've chosen the word happy. That comes from the stamp set called So Much Happy. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be using the bundle for this stamp set, which includes the coordinating dies, and I'll show you those in just a moment. I'm going to go ahead and ink this up, and rather than stamping it vertically, I'm going to stamp it on the diagonal. I find, too, it's a little bit more forgiving if it's not perfectly straight. Now, when you purchase stamps and dies as a bundle, you're going to save yourself 10%, and it's also going to ensure that you have those dies for that stamp set. I'm going to go ahead and repeat this process now across the cardstock. The one thing I love about Versamark ink is not only is it intended to be used with embossing powders to heat set them, but it creates the most beautiful tone-on-tone watermark backgrounds. Very important, you're going to want to make sure that you clean your stamp right away because that residue is rather sticky. I'm going to set this panel aside for right now, and I've cut myself a piece of Calypso Coral cardstock. This is where I'm going to use the die from that bundle, and here are the dies here. And these are called the Happy dies, and they coordinate with that stamp set. This die right here is very, very interesting, so I wanted to show you how I'm going to be using it on today's card. But you can see adhering it can be very challenging, and that was until I was introduced to the brand new foam adhesive strips. I love these, and now you may think because of the thickness that you cannot die cut them, but they die cut beautifully. Let me show you how you use them. They are double-sided, so I'm going to remove one of the paper backings from one side. I'm going to position that here in the middle of the cardstock. Very important that the adhesive side is down, and then what you're going to do is you're going to place your die on the top. This is going to leave this area die cut open, but it's going to leave you a margin here and here, which is really important if you want to attach it to either the center or the bottom of your card. I've gone ahead and I've ran these through my die cutting machine, and I'm going to flip this over so that you can see. Do you see how well it's die cut, not only through the cardstock, but also through the foam adhesive sheet for those letters? So I'm going to go ahead and just peel this off. I'm going to poke out the pieces that are here in the center. Those are the negatives. That is going to leave us with this. This margin at the top is going to be very, very helpful for us to be able to edit to that panel that we just stamped. So this is going to go here. I did cut my cardstock so it would be the same length as this layer, but you can always cut it later if you choose. But I don't want the bottom edge for today's card. So I'm simply going to put this on my trimmer and I'm going to trim away the excess. And that has left me with this. I'm going to use my silicone craft sheet one more time to work on adhering these two pieces together. I'm going to add adhesive across the cardstock strip here using the Stamp and Seal Plus. I'm going to take my stamped panel and I'm going to align this to get the outside edges as even as possible. And I'm going to move this down so that the words are even with the edge of the cardstock. If you have any excess showing, you can go ahead and take your scissors and just trim that away. Now that that's finished, we're going to go ahead and get that ready for the card base. I'm going to hold it here just to get an idea of where I want to stamp the word birthday. One of the beautiful things about Stampin' Up! Products is the color coordination. So I've brought in the Calypso Coral ink pad, which coordinates with the cardstock. And this is what I'm going to stamp the word birthday in. All from that same stamp set, I've pulled out the word birthday here. We're going to go ahead and ink that up. And we're going to stamp that here near the bottom. Before I adhere this panel, I want to do one other thing. So I'm going to set that here off to the side. In the dies, you're going to see this fun banner of streamers here. So I die cut that from Whisper White cardstock. And before you joined me, I took the liberty of coloring every other one a different color in a 3-color combination. I used Mango Melody, Bermuda Bay, and Calypso Coral, and I repeated the pattern all the way across. Now I used these by making sure I had a piece of scratch paper underneath me, and I used the Stampin' Blends markers. And all I did was just color in the bottom portion so that I had a multicolored pattern. I want to decorate the upper top corner here on this layer, and it's best to do that before you put it on the cardstock. So I'm just going to lay it and get an idea of positioning. And once I'm happy with that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to snip where I want that to end. So I'm just going to cut this right here. I'm going to save that other piece. I'm going to flip this over and I'm going to add tiny drops of liquid glue. Now I like to get my liquid glue started right here on my silicone craft sheet to make sure that no big clumps are going to come out. And you might recall that I said that liquid glue, hot glue, and adhesive will not stick to that silicone craft sheet. That glue will turn opaque, and then once it's turned that color, I can go ahead and rub it right off. I'll use my Take Your Pick tool to help me pick that up. That now is going to get attached here to the top left corner of that layer. The other piece that's left, I decided to cascade across here just for some visual interest. Now I know that this end will eventually be hidden by one of my balloons. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing by adding small drops of liquid glue to the back side. I'm going to align my top left corner here so that's within the perimeters of the cardstock. Then I'll tack this streamer down as well. Now let's work on the balloons. I've got a scrap piece of Whisper White cardstock here. I've got that same Calypso Coral ink pad, and I'm choosing the starred balloon that's inside that stamp set. We'll go ahead and stamp that here. I'm going to flip over to the Mango Melody ink pad. You'll notice that these are the same colors we used for those streamers, and I'll stamp that here. And then finally, I have the Coastal Cabana. I'm going to use the smaller striped balloon for that. I'm leaving space between these because there are separate dies for the large and the small balloon. And I want to maximize my pass through my die cutting machine by die cutting several images at one time. In addition to the wonderful dies, there's one for the strings of the balloon. So I'm going to add that on top, as well as the dies for the large and the small balloon. I like to use low tack painter's tape to hold these in place so I can put them all through my die cutting machine at one time. I'm going to die cut this multiple times so I have a total of 3 strings. That has now left me with this. My next step is to attach those strings to the balloon, and let me show you the easiest way to do that. I'm going to start with the coral balloon first. I'm going to flip that over, and I'm going to grab one of my dimensionals. I'm also grabbing one of those streamers. I'm going to make sure that I position that streamer where I want it, aligning it to the base, and I'm going to tack that down and secure it in place with one of the dimensionals. And I'll add another one here near the top. I'm taking the one that I stamped in Mango Melody, but we're going to do the same thing. But this time, making sure that my streamers are looking a little bit different than the one next to it. Because I know I'm going to overlap my balloons, look what happens when I put them close together. It looks like I've created a bow. Now there is a die for the bow, but I decided to go ahead and make sure that I just align them this way to eliminate one step. Then you can gravitate this to make this shorter or longer. Once you have your positioning, you can go ahead and use your dimensional to tack that down. My last balloon is the striped one. It's the small one. I'm going to flip that over. And I want the string shorter, so I'm actually going to gravitate this all the way up here near the top and tack that in place. I'm going to grab my scissors. I'm going to cut away this excess. That now has allowed me to make sure that my strings are slightly different. I'm going to push these off to the side, and before we go ahead and decorate the front and finish it up, let's do some stamping on the inside of the card. Once the cover has been decorated, this area here will become very bumpy. I've got my scratch paper once again, just in case I stamp off my work surface, and I've opened up the card base. Here in the center, we're going to stamp our greeting. And I've chosen the word happy again. This is the same one that we used on the outside in Versamark. I'm inking up in the Coastal Cabana ink, and I'm stamping that here. From the same stamp set, I've pulled out the words to celebrate you. One of the reasons I love this stamp set is the ability to create custom phrases. I'm going to ink that up in the Coastal Cabana, and we'll stamp that here. Finally, I'm going back to the Mango Melody ink pad, and I've chosen the star from that stamp set, so I'm going to go ahead and ink that up. I'm going to stamp one up here, and then down here on the lower right side panel, I'm going to stamp 3. Now that we have the inside all stamped, I'm going to go ahead and close this up, and I'm going to do one more image here. I want to make sure I don't consume too much room because I want to leave lots of room for signatures. But I want these panels decorated so they look intentional. I'm grabbing that star balloon one more time, and I'm inking it up in the Calypso Coral, and I'll stamp that here. I've mounted the large string image from the stamp set, and then once again, we're going to protect that work surface because I know it's going to go off of there. And I'm going to ink that up in the Coastal Cabana coordinating ink we've just used. And I'm going to stamp that here. So once again, this is the inside of the card with our greeting. We've decorated our panels. I'm folding the right side in, and now this is the cover. And let's go ahead and attach that panel we've created. Now keep in mind that there's a difference in elevation here because we used those foam adhesive strips. So we're going to need to use either more foam adhesive strips around the perimeter, or in my case, we're going to use dimensionals. I want to point out too that the dimensionals and the foam adhesive strips are the exact same depth, which makes this really, really easy to use. I'm very careful to make sure that I'm balancing those because I want to make sure the card is going to hold up through the mail. Once I have those positioned, I'm going to use my Take Your Pick tool with that paper piercing tool attachment to help me remove those paper backings. This now is going to get centered near the top portion of the card base. I've gone ahead and I've just peeled off that paper backing. I find that only peeling a little bit at a time allows me to make sure that my positioning is well because these are very, very sticky, and I'm going to tack that in place. Let's go ahead now and let's work on those balloons. I've got the Mango Melody one here, and we'll remove those dimensionals. I'm going to place this one here near the top right corner. I've just removed the dimensional backing from this one for the coral, and I'm going to create that bow. So I'm going to overlap these. No two cards are ever going to look alike, so the positioning is going to be slightly different. And then finally, we have that small balloon with the stripes. And this time I'm going to offset this one, and it's going to overlap those other strings. Now this area is a little bit loose, so I'm going to come in with my liquid glue one more time, and I'm going to add a small dot right here underneath those layers to kind of hold those together. I like to use my Take Your Pick tool to press and hold that in place. And there we have our expanded card. So when you open it up, you've got slight decorations and all the panels and plenty of room for everyone to sign. You'll be able to find the So Much Happy stamp set and the dies or the bundle in the current annual catalog. If you don't already have a demonstrator and you are interested in receiving a copy, head over to lisasstampstudio.com, click on catalogs where you can request one there. If you have enjoyed today's video, please give it a thumbs up here on YouTube, which is a like. It certainly helps. And I look forward to having you join me next time. Have a great day.